In Kate McCann's personal diary, written months before the tragedy, there is an entry that has become the phantom echo of the entire case. She wrote about how difficult it was to get her children to sleep, describing them as going crazy and expressing her exhaustion. This entry is not just the venting of a tired mother. It is the first page of a story that ends with a fatal miscalculation. This video is not about a kidnapping. It is about the fine line between a remedy and a poison, and about how a mother's attempt to find peace may have led her daughter to eternal silence. And the proof of this is not in a conspiracy theory, but in the frightening convergence between Kate's diary, the McCann's profession, and the science of pharmacology. The story we were told is almost a fairy tale in reverse. It begins in a paradise, Praia da Luz, Portugal, a holiday resort where danger seems like a distant fiction. At the center of the story we have the perfect characters, Kate and Jerry McCann, two British doctors, successful, educated, the image of the ideal couple, and of course the princess of the tale, Madeleine, a 3-year-old girl with unmistakable eyes, a face that would become one of the most recognized on the planet. The official narrative is simple, almost rehearsed. On the night of May 3, 2007, the doctor parents are dining with friends at a tapas restaurant, just 50 meters from the apartment where their 3 young children are sleeping. They feel safe. They have created a rotation system to check on the children, a decision that later the entire world would judge with the ferocity of a tribunal. At 10 o'clock at night, the fairy tale shatters. Kate McCann goes to check on her children and finds Madeleine's bed empty. The bedroom window open. Panic sets in. The frantic search begins, first with friends, then with resort staff, then with the police. Paradise transforms into a crime scene. The world watches horrified. $1-million donations are made. Celebrities like David Beckham and J.K. Rowling appeal for help. Madeleine's face is everywhere. The story is clear. An innocent child was abducted from her bed by a monster who came in through the window. A perfect family was destroyed by an unforeseeable tragedy. This is the story they sold us. The polished version packaged for the media. The story that needed to be true for the world to continue making sense. This is the story that spread across the world. And speaking of the world, I'm curious, what time is it where you are watching? Leave a comment below. It's always fascinating to see how our community of investigators spreads to all corners of the planet, united in the search for truth, no matter the time zone. Now, let's get back to the case, because it is right there in the story that everyone accepted, that the biggest lie of all is hidden. But what if there was no monster? What if the danger didn't come from the outside through the window, but from within in the form of care that turned fatal? What if the kidnapping story is just a smokescreen to hide a much more intimate and, for the parents, much more incriminating tragedy? The thesis of this video is direct and disturbing. There was no abduction. Madeleine McCann died inside that apartment, that night, the victim of an accidental overdose of sedatives, a miscalculation born from the exhaustion and overconfidence of doctor parents who tried to ensure a quiet night's sleep and ended up causing a silent death. What followed was not a search, but a desperate cover-up to hide the negligence that led to the tragedy. This video will dissect the psychology behind this fatal error. We will explore how the pressure for a perfect vacation, parental exhaustion, and professional arrogance may have created the perfect storm. To prove this, we first need to understand the mindset that leads to such a grave error. And that mindset begins to be revealed long before that fateful night. In the pages of Kate's own diary, to understand how a miscalculation could have happened, we first need to demolish the fiction that was built to hide it. The kidnapping narrative, when placed under the cold light of forensic logic, begins to disintegrate. The crime scene is not just the starting point of the investigation. It is the first witness, and it tells a very different story from the one the McCanns told us. They said an abductor entered through the children's bedroom window, but the evidence shows a physical impossibility. The window, according to forensics, had no signs of forced entry. The external shutters were raised, and the glass window was opened from the inside. For this to happen, the abductor would have to have the skills of a contortionist, reaching the latch through a tiny gap without leaving a single fingerprint, a strand of hair, a fiber of clothing, a forensic ghost. The Portuguese police tried to recreate this entry and failed. It's a circus act, not the work of a criminal in a silent operation. They said the abductor left through the front door, carrying a 3-year-old child. But the front door, according to the McCanns themselves, was locked. They unlocked it when they returned. Then the story changed. The abductor must have left through the back patio door, a door that conveniently was unlocked. The problem is that this back door opened onto a common area, visible from the restaurant where the parents and their friends were. The official story asks us to believe in a criminal who is both an invisible acrobat and an idiot who chooses the riskiest possible escape route. The crime scene doesn't scream abduction, it whispers staged. If the physical evidence is a puzzle with missing pieces, the human evidence is a theater of contradictions. The statements of the McCanns and their friends, the so-called Tapas 7, should be the solid foundation of the investigation. Instead, they became a swamp of inconsistencies, a series of performances that do not withstand minimal scrutiny. Let's start with the dinner contradiction. The group claimed to have a system of checking on the children every 30 minutes. But the records in their own statements show a mess. Jerry McCann says he checked on the children around 9:05 p.m. A friend, Matthew Oldfield, was supposed to check at 9:30 p.m., but he only glanced through the McCann's bedroom door, saw nothing and returned. He did not confirm if Madeleine was there. The next check doesn't happen until 10:00 p.m., when Kate raises the alarm. The infallible security system had a gap of almost an hour, exactly in the time window when the alleged abduction would have occurred. Then we have the phantom sighting. A friend from the group, Jane Tanner, claimed to have seen a man carrying a child around 9:15 p.m., walking away from the apartment. This became the main alibi, the proof that an abductor was there. For years, this was the focus of the investigation. The problem? Years later, a British tourist proved that he was the man Jane Tanner saw. He was just carrying his own sleeping daughter, back from the resort's daycare. The main pillar of the abduction theory was not a pillar, it was smoke. With Jane Tanner's sighting debunked, there is not a single credible eyewitness of an abductor that night. No one. And finally, the irregular checks. Jerry's statement about his 9:05 p.m. visit is particularly strange. He says he entered the room, saw the children, and upon leaving left the bedroom door ajar. He claims to be sure of this. But when Kate enters at 10:00 p.m., she says the door was wide open, much more so than Jerry had left it. Someone must have moved the door. The abductor? Why? Why would a criminal in the midst of a silent abduction bother to open the bedroom door wider? The open door, like the window, seems less the action of an intruder and more a detail planted to build a narrative. Their story simply doesn't add up. What do you think is the most glaring inconsistency so far? The statement about the window or the confusing dinner schedules? Leave your investigator's opinion in the comments below. The theories from this community often see what others ignore. When logic fails and testimonies contradict each other, modern investigation turns to silent heroes, witnesses who cannot lie, who cannot be intimidated, science. And in the McCann case, science arrived in the form of 2 Springer Spaniels, Eddie and Keela, brought from England. Eddie was a dog trained to detect the scent of human cadavers, even in minute amounts. Keela was trained to detect traces of blood, even if cleaned. What they found demolished the official narrative. Inside apartment 5A, weeks after the disappearance, Eddie gave a positive alert for the scent of a cadaver in several locations. Behind the sofa in the living room, and most damningly in the parents' bedroom near the wardrobe. Keela, the blood dog, also alerted on the floor of the same room. Science was saying that there had been death and blood in that apartment, but the most devastating discovery came later. The dogs were taken to inspect the car the McCanns rented 25 days after Madeleine's disappearance. Her Renault Scenic. Inside the trunk and near the key in the ignition, Eddie alerted again unequivocally to the scent of a cadaver. Keela also found traces of blood in the trunk. Samples were collected from these locations and sent to a cutting-edge forensic laboratory in the UK. The result was the atomic bomb of the case. The DNA found in the car's trunk was a match for Madeleine McCann's DNA. The scent of a cadaver and Madeleine's DNA were found in a car rented almost a month after she was supposedly abducted by a stranger. There is no innocent explanation for this. There is no way an abductor could have put Madeleine's body in her parents' car weeks later. The only logical explanation is that Madeleine's body had been in that car, and the only people who had access to that car were Kate and Jerry McCann. Science was screaming that a body had been there. In the room. In the car. A truth that cannot be ignored. If the kidnapping story is a sham, and the evidence points to a death inside the apartment, the question becomes inevitable. What caused that death? To answer that, we must do what the police never did: reconstruct the night of the crime based on the psychology of exhaustion and the power contained in a simple bottle of medicine. Forget the story of the phantom abductor. Forget the open window. To understand what really happened, we need to go back inside that apartment and follow the trail of evidence, not words. The night of May 3, 2007 likely happened like this. The vacation is not turning out to be the expected paradise. The children, out of their routine, are restless and have trouble sleeping. Kate and Jerry, exhausted, long for a quiet evening with their friends. The pressure for normalcy, to enjoy the vacation they paid for, is immense. They are doctors. They understand medication. The idea of using something to help the children sleep doesn't seem dangerous. It seems efficient. That night, the decision is made. Maybe it's Calpol, a common pain reliever given in a slightly larger dose. Maybe it's something stronger, a benzodiazepine that they as doctors could have access to. The intention is not malicious. The intention is silence, peace. Kate administers the sedative. Madeleine, perhaps because she is more sensitive, perhaps because the dose was a miscalculation, has a bad reaction. Her breathing becomes shallow. Her central nervous system begins to shut down. It's a silent, treacherous process. There are no screams, no struggle. Just a sleep that deepens until it becomes permanent. The first real check of the night is Jerry's around 9:05 p.m. He enters the room. He sees the twins sleeping, but Madeleine is motionless, too quiet. He approaches, touches her. She is cold. There is no breath. Panic, cold and absolute, takes over. He is a doctor. He knows the difference between deep sleep and death. In that moment, his world splits into two realities. In the first, he runs outside, screams for help, calls an ambulance, and faces the consequences of his actions: an investigation for negligence, the administration of unprescribed sedatives, the loss of his medical license, the scandal, the ruin of his career and reputation. The image of the perfect family would be shattered forever. In the second reality, he can try to control the situation. He can hide what happened. He is an intelligent man, used to being in control, to solving problems. The accidental death of his daughter is a problem to be solved. The first decision is the most crucial. Tell no one. He returns to the dinner table, his face a mask of normalcy, hell burning inside. He needs time. He needs to think. When Kate enters the room at 10 p.m., the scene is already set. The window is open, the curtain sways. The bed is empty. Her scream is real, but perhaps not of surprise, but of horror at seeing her husband's plan in action. Or perhaps Jerry only told her at that moment, forcing her to become an accomplice. The body, in the meantime, is hidden. Maybe in a closet, maybe wrapped in a blanket. The sniffer dogs detected the scent of a cadaver behind the sofa and in the parents' wardrobe. The body was there, waiting. What leads two people to do something so monstrous? The answer is not pure evil. It's a toxic mix of panic, guilt, and above all, professional arrogance. The fear of the consequences became greater than the pain of the loss. For a doctor, a figure of authority and prestige, admitting such a catastrophic failure, negligence resulting in the death of one's own daughter, is unthinkable. The career, the social status, the community's admiration, all would be annihilated. Self-preservation is the strongest human instinct. Faced with the choice between total ruin and a desperate lie, they chose the lie. They built a fortress of denial around themselves, and the search for Madeleine became the wall of that fortress. As long as they were the grieving parents, they could not be the negligent parents. The public persona became the perfect shield. They weren't just deceiving the world, they were perhaps trying to deceive themselves, repeating the lie so many times until it became the only truth they could bear. So far, does this reconstruction of events seem more plausible than the story of a phantom abductor? Does the psychology of fear and self-preservation better explain their actions than the pain of grief? Let me know in the comments if the pieces are starting to fit for you. Because the evidence I'm about to show you is not a theory. It is the proof that seals this case. The definitive proof. The smoking gun that supports the theory of an accidental overdose is not a single piece of evidence, but the convergence of three facts that together form a pattern impossible to ignore: the diary, the witness, and the science. First, the diary. Months before the trip, Kate McCann wrote about the difficulty she had getting her children to sleep. She describes the children as going crazy at night. This establishes a crucial precedent. The exhaustion and frustration with the children's sleep was not a new problem. It was a chronic one. The desire for a solution, any solution, already existed long before that night. Second, the witness. During the investigation, one of the friends in the group, Jane Tanner, admitted in a statement that the McCanns used medication to help their children sleep on long flights. This information is a bombshell. It confirms that the practice of sedating the children was not a taboo for the couple. It was a tool they had used before. The idea of using a sedative that night would not have been a moral leap, but simply the application of a known method in a new situation. And third, the science. The sniffer dogs. The dog's reaction to the scent of a cadaver inside the apartment and, crucially, in the rental car weeks later, only makes sense in a scenario where Madeleine's body was under the parents' control after her death. But the most important detail is where the dogs reacted. One of the strongest alerts from Eddie, the cadaver dog, was in a corner of the parents' bedroom, near a wardrobe. A perfect place to temporarily hide something in the panic of the first few hours. Put the pieces together. The diary establishes the motive, exhaustion. The witness establishes the method. The use of sedatives was normal for them. And the science establishes the consequence, a body that needed to be hidden and then moved. The kidnapping story explains none of this. The accidental overdose theory explains everything. It is the only key that opens all the locks. With the proof on the table, the question changes. It's no longer what happened to Madeleine, but who helped hide the truth. The answer involves a conspiracy much larger than just a panicked couple. It involves the power of an entire state. The truth has incredible power, but it is not invincible. It can be silenced. And in the case of Madeleine McCann, the truth was not just silenced. It was actively crushed by a system that decided the reputation of a country and the image of an influential British couple were more important than justice for a dead child. When the Portuguese police, led by Gonçalo Amaral, put the pieces together, the documented exhaustion in the diary, the prior use of sedatives, the staged crime scene, the sniffer dogs, the DNA in the car, they did what any police force would do. They declared Kate and Jerry McCann as arguidos, the Portuguese term for formal suspects. The investigation was on the right track. The truth was about to explode, and that's when the conspiracy began. The reaction from the British government was immediate and overwhelming. The then Prime Minister Gordon Brown and his ambassador to Portugal became directly involved in the case, not to help find a missing child, but to defend the McCanns. The diplomatic pressure on Portugal was immense. The British media, instead of investigating, launched a brutal campaign to discredit the Portuguese police, painting them as incompetent, lazy, and xenophobic. Because of the sniffer dog evidence, the consequence was a campaign to disqualify the work of Martin Grime, the dog's handler, one of the world's top experts. Because of the DNA found in the car, the consequence was an endless debate about the validity of low-level DNA samples, a distraction tactic to confuse the public. Because of the McCanns being declared suspects, the consequence was the removal of Gonçalo Amaral from the case. The man who dared to follow the trail of truth was silenced. The system did not want the truth. The truth was ugly, inconvenient. It would tarnish Portugal's image as a safe tourist destination and create a diplomatic incident with the United Kingdom. It was easier, cleaner, to embrace the fiction of the mysterious abductor. The investigation was closed. The McCanns were cleared for lack of evidence, and they returned to England as tragic heroes, victims of an incompetent foreign police force at a devastating human cost. The price of truth was paid by those who refused to remain silent. Gonçalo Amaral, the detective who led the investigation, had his career destroyed. He wrote a book, Maddie, The Truth of the Lie, detailing the evidence he found. In response, the McCanns sued him, dragging him through a legal battle that lasted nearly a decade, trying to silence him and bankrupt him. He became the scapegoat, the villain of the story, punished for doing his job. Other witnesses who contradicted the McCann's version were intimidated or ignored. People who lived in Praia da Luz and who suspected the couple from the beginning were labeled as cruel gossips. The truth became radioactive. To touch it meant risking your reputation, your career, your peace. The system sent a clear message to everyone: stay silent. Let the story die. It's infuriating. It's frustrating. And that's why this channel exists. If you believe these stories of cover-ups need to be told, that the truth cannot be buried by power and money, then join this mission. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Every subscription is a vote of confidence and a sign that we are not alone in this search. In the end, the moral verdict is clear. Despite a body of evidence that overwhelmingly points to an accidental death followed by a cover-up, the Madeleine McCann case remains officially unsolved. Justice was never served, not for lack of clues, but for lack of will. The system chose to protect the powerful instead of defending the innocent. The narrative of a German super abductor, Christian Bruckner, which emerged years later, seems more like a desperate attempt to give the public a new villain, a convenient closure that doesn't disturb the status quo and keeps the McCanns in the role of victims. But this theory, like the original abduction one, is fragile and lacks concrete evidence directly connecting it to Madeleine's disappearance. It's another smokescreen. The system won. Justice was buried along with Madeleine's body. But in the midst of all this darkness, one final question remains, the most personal of all. What does this terrible story teach us about our own world? And what do we do with this inconvenient truth? What does this terrible story teach us about our own world? It teaches us that justice is not blind. It has a price. And that sometimes the truth is just a negotiable commodity in the market of power and influence. My conviction, after years of analyzing every piece of this puzzle, is clear and painful. Madeleine McCann was not the victim of a monster who crept through the night. She was the victim of a series of tragic decisions, starting with negligence and ending with arrogance. What haunts me is not the mystery of what happened to her, but the clarity of what happened afterward. A conspiracy of silence orchestrated by fear and ego, and validated by a system that preferred a comfortable lie to an inconvenient truth. The greatest tragedy of this case is not the crime, but the cover-up. And now, after we have gone through all this together, I need to know what this story has awakened in you. Use the comments below not to debate, but to bear witness. Witness your outrage. Leave a word, a sentence that shows we have not forgotten, and we do not accept the silence. I will read every comment, because in a world that wants us to be quiet, our collective voice is the only weapon we have, and this fight against silence does not end here. The same dynamics of power, influence, and secrets we saw in Portugal are repeated in an infamous case in the United States. In our next documentary, we will investigate how the wealth and influence of the Ramsey family may have buried the truth along with their 6-year-old daughter, JonBenét. To continue on this mission with me, subscribe and turn on notifications. The search for truth cannot stop. Until next time, remember, the truth doesn't need you to believe in it. It only needs you not to forget it.